Burnout, stress, anxiety, depression. They're issues that affect people in a lot of different industries, but they can be even a bigger problem for content creators, specifically those who are working alone.
A lot of creators struggle to take breaks because they're worried their audience won't wait. How do you give yourself permission to pause?
When your job demands so much creative, emotional, and mental energy, it can feel like you're giving away pieces of yourself just to keep up. And that kind of pressure can take a real toll on your mental health.
I think that most of our creators acknowledge that mental health is super important, but we do get a lot of questions about where they can get started.
So how do you put yourself first in a business that often asks you to give everything? And how do you prioritize self-care when your creative hustle tells you keep going? Take a deep breath and let's find out.
Welcome to First Frame, brought to you by TELUS STORYHIVE. I'm Jennifer Park.
And I'm Cameron Zinger, and we're here to help empower new and emerging Canadian content creators by answering their most pressing questions, sharing diverse success stories, and getting insights from people who've been down this path before.
On every episode, we unpack the journey of a leading Canadian creator or creators, all the way from inception to completion. We'll hear about their wins and their challenges, and ultimately provide the creative community with mentorship and a sense of belonging.
Canadian content creators need a podcast to call home. This is it.
To close out this season, we're shining a light on a topic that all too often takes a backseat to other priorities in the creative journey: mental health.
Jen, we've seen so many creators either have burnout mid-project or they get anxiety over how are they going to finish their project and how's their work even going to be received when it is finished.
100%. There's a big ripple effect when it comes to well-being too, because if you're not looking after yourself, it's really tough to show up for your team and stay grounded in your creative projects.
So today, we're thrilled to be joined by two guests who know firsthand about the pressures content creators face. First, it's my pleasure to introduce Lindsay Killam. She's the Director of Counseling at TELUS Health MyCare. Lindsay, welcome to First Frame.
Thank you. It's great to be here today.
Also joining us today is Tazeen Ahmed, Operations Manager at the Documentary Organization of Canada. Tazeen, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into today's topic, though, we'd love to learn a little bit more about each of you and your professional backgrounds. So, Lindsay, how did you first get into the world of mental health, and what kind of work are you doing now?
I've been in the field for almost 25 years now, and I really just stumbled into it in my 20s through some amazing people that I met who were in helping professions, and they inspired me and mentored me and led me down a path of becoming a clinical social worker and spending many years working in our public healthcare system in mental health and substance use. And then as I aged, I grew in my practice and started doing some private work, and then adapted with technology, and about 8 years ago moved into the online sphere with connecting people to alcohol support for reducing alcohol consumption through a virtual setting, and then joining the TELUS team at TELUS Health MyCare, leading a group of counselors and clinicians in BC, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec.
Tazeen, what about you? Can you tell us a little bit more about your role at Doc Canada and what brought you there?
I'm the operations manager at Documentary Organization of Canada. We are the collective voice of Canada's independent documentary creators with 1,500 members, more than 1,500 members across 6 chapters from coast to coast to coast. We published a report in 2023 called the Documentality Report in partnership with Film in Mind, the D Word, and the Documentality Project. It's a larger project across the globe. This is the first of its kind report that addresses mental health of documentary filmmakers specifically. It's quite an in-depth report and very interesting findings came out that I think will be useful for anybody in the film industry, because there's so much commonality across the board that kind of points us towards what we should be working towards as an industry to make it more equitable and sustainable.
Now that we've had a chance to get to know each of you a little bit better, let's focus on the unique pressures content creators face when it comes to protecting their mental health and well being. So, the first question I have is, do you think people working in the creative world are taking enough time to focus on their mental health? And more importantly, are people actually taking it seriously?
Oh, I think that's a big question. And I think in general, in my experience of supporting people through mental health, that people don't put enough energy into their self care and their well being. We tend to just in first world life live very busy lives and have that self care piece as secondary. And I think that in the world of creators, there's uh, a set of stressors that's really unique to that field that can make that mental health piece feel even more difficult to manage. For example, a lot of people who are creators find that there's ongoing pressure to stay relevant in their field, and that creates a cycle of sort of workaholic behavior of being on call, being ready to go, being ready to drop something new 24/7, and can interfere with what we would ideally want as work life balance. And the secondary piece to that is that in creator life, in creative worlds and outlets, there's also a piece around public scrutiny, and that other people are constantly putting value on your work that may not match with what drove you to do that work in the first place. And that can really have an impact on self-esteem, confidence, anxiety, stress, all kinds of mental health variables that some people feel like they maybe don't have any filter or control over. They have to just push through.
Do you think that there's still a stigma around burnout and mental health struggles in creative circles?
You mean that it's not okay to burn out and
Exactly.
that if you do, you are a weak person or something? Definitely, there's a lot of burnout and the competition of, finding resources, funding, and pitching, I think, is a very, very daunting task for doc filmmakers, especially because so many of documentary projects can be dealing with something very heavy, but also oftentimes deal with something personal. Or a personal connection to that subject. So, I'm imagining if you're at some kind of a market situation and you're having to pitch this project with 10 other doc filmmakers and you feel exhausted, I would say that would be a pressure to be like, no, I can't show it. I can't show that I am tired.
Yeah. Lindsay, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think it's so interesting to hear from somebody who's, in the industry and sees how that cycle of exhaustion works. And, I was recently speaking to a friend of mine who's a documentary filmmaker, and she was speaking similarly to what Tazeen was just saying about how, when she's doing a film, she's so immersed in it, and it's exhausting but exhilarating to be immersed in it. But as it approaches wrapping up, she's already thinking about funding and resources and what the next project needs to be to stay afloat creatively and stay afloat financially. So there's always this anticipation of finishing a project and finally getting to step back and have sleep and take care of oneself and visit friends. But then reality check hits as soon as the project is done of having to get to that next thing. And it really interferes with focusing on well-being or even being able to be present with burnout. And sometimes I think in the industry, there's also this sense of, a badge of honor in being able to tough it out and get through it, and that's a measure of success. But in the long term, it's not healthy for us, and we do end up with consequences in the long term.
Well, I know we're going to jump into specifics around resources for people a little bit later on in the podcast, but do you both believe that most creators are aware of what's available out there for them?
I'm not too sure how well known that information is, because at least for doc filmmakers, there's a lot of newcomer filmmakers here. So, I mean, that's a challenge for them. But overall, for example, it's only last year we created a database for accessing mental health resources that are already available out there. It's available on our website. But, it came out of us going to regions, and we have 6 chapters across the country. So it came out of talking to our chapters. One of the suggestions was that, like, they wanted a one-stop shop kind of, right? So yeah, there's all these resources out there. Maybe a lot of people don't know that. And even if they do, it's kind of like all over the place. It depends from province to province. So that was, at least in our case, we kind of like consolidated everything and put it out there, and also found resources specifically for documentary filmmakers. There are a few counselors who work in that field specifically. So I hope people find it. It's on our website, docorg.ca. It's open for everybody, not just members.
We're blessed to work for an organization that strongly focuses on mental health and provides supports for mental health. But I think if you look at sort of independent producers, independent creatives who maybe don't work for a company that have corporate benefits, it's not front and center to think about. They don't know where to access it. There could be a cost. So I feel like perhaps those creators and filmmakers might struggle a little bit more to know what's out there.
100%. And yeah, filmmakers are, like you said, independent artists, producers. They're not on some health plan benefit most of the time. And it's very hard for them to access mental health resources in that, like facing financial challenges. And also, it's a gig economy. They have financial precarity anyways. So again, if we think of the first question, well, do people think of, doing self-care? Well, they don't. And if you have financial precarity already, again, you tend to not, you want to save that money for something else.
For the next part of the podcast, we're going to take a break from the serious stuff for a segment we like to call What's in Your Kit.
Normally we do this. We ask creators about their like either a favorite tool in their kits, but in this case, we want to hear from both of you about a mental health kit. So what are some of your go-to tools or strategies when it comes to self-care?
So one of the things is I am really enjoying swimming recently. It's like a different universe. I can just hop in and forget about everything. So that has been very helpful for me. And if that's not possible, I don't know, just getting up from my, if it's, when I'm working, just taking a pause, getting up, walking around, doing something, I don't know, making tea, I think helps, just like a day-to-day thing.
Lindsay, what about you? What's in your toolkit?
Some of the things that I practice that I encourage my clients to practice as well is the simple act of getting outside. So we know through studies through Yale University that in as little as 20 minutes outdoors, our cortisol levels go down. So our cortisol is our stress hormone. And when we feel chronically stressed, those levels get high and cause other health implications and sleep implications for us. So just that act of taking lunch and sitting outside for lunch, or choosing to walk around the block a couple of times and do a meeting, on my phone while I'm walking, or just sitting on the front stoop with the computer and having the sunshine during the summer. These simple things of just getting outside actually improve our cortisol levels and help us to feel healthier and better throughout the day. Another strategy that I use is my sort of toolkit for staying in the here and now. Because I find that when I'm busy, I end up going into autopilot of go, go, go. And I end up getting caught in thinking cycles that take me into the future and make me feel like I'm spiraling out of control. So just getting back into the here and now. And the way that I've built that into my day is to take an extra 2 to 5 minutes every time I use the bathroom during the day, and just do a little self-check inventory. So I take a moment to check how my body's feeling. Am I tense anywhere? Am I feeling unrest? I check how I'm feeling emotionally. And then I ask myself, what is the next thing I need to do for myself over the next 20 minutes? So being able to just get back into what do I have control over right now? And it becomes a built-in check-in point that requires no extra effort multiple times a day.
That is so useful. Thanks for that tip.
The great thing about it as well is that no one bugs you when you're in the bathroom. And in fact, if you're taking extra time, people steer clear. So you're really gaining some space when you go into the bathroom.
All right, speaking of tools, let's double down on what are some actionable advice for our creators. What are some simple, realistic things that they can start doing today to prioritize mental health? And if you can share any practical tips around setting boundaries or finding moments to reset, because I think that piece is very hard for a lot of creators, is being able to stop.
A practical advice would be, I think I don't know how else to say this, but to really accept that it's okay, that you need time off and you need to rest. Rest is a good thing. It can rejuvenate you. It can make your ideas, and you will find new perspectives and new ways of looking at your own ideas.
And I think that rest can actually rejuvenate someone and sort of bring life back into, their task of content creation,
Yes,
right? Kind of bring
100%.
bring the passion back. Lindsay, what do you think are some sort of practical tips around setting boundaries, finding moments to reset?
Yeah, I think it's really hard for most people. And, the thing with work-life balance is that it varies from person to person. So I think it's doing a little bit of an inventory about what does that balance look like for you, and being able to self-check around that and then implement the tools that give that balance. And I think Tazeen really captured some of those little things that we can do. So it might be something as simple as at mealtime, putting the phone away and making sure you're focused on enjoying a meal or enjoying the company that you're with without responding to pings the whole time. Or taking a moment to step away from what you're doing and maybe just even stretch and regroup and come back. Those little things can just help us to get perspective in situations. And in terms of work-life boundaries as well, I think that an important piece to explore for most people is also that relationship with social media and how much of our time in our life we spend not being meaningful in or intentional in how we're spending our time, and setting some limits around that.
I was going to say, let me tell you.
Guilty.
We all are.
Started using the screen time tracker, and my gosh, did that put a perspective on my life on how much time I spend on my phone, and realizing I needed to set it down. So, yeah.
and making choices about what we're doing when we're online. So sometimes a fun moment in the day is watching a funny dog video, and it's very healing to watch dogs, jumping into pools or whatever it is. But going down a rabbit hole of doom scrolling ends up not being beneficial at all. So, really having some filters about how we can use our social media and our phones to have a great break, and when it's not good for us and when it's not good for our mental health and well-being. So those little pieces. And I think another one that doesn't get talked about enough that is, again, a really easy thing to do is activating self-compassion. So particularly when you're in an industry that is very ripe with scrutiny and judgment and feedback from others, to be able to step back and just say to yourself, I'm feeling some really negative self-talk right now. I'm feeling really drained emotionally. If somebody came to me and said that they were struggling with this, what support would I give them? And then turning that on ourselves, because we're often our own worst critic. And just being able to activate our own self-compassion and treat ourselves kindly can be a hugely healing thing and can motivate other positive self-care.
That's so hard to do, though.
It is hard to do. It is hard to do. And we're actually hardwired as humans to be self-critical and to feel not enough. It's part of our survival system, and we have to very consciously practice countering that.
So once we've gotten through that hard push, do you guys have any tips for how our creators or filmmakers can put themselves first and re-energize and get back to a good place on their mental health and their state and re-energize themselves?
Knowing what fits for you to be able to unwind from something or decompress from something is important. So for some people, that might be some kind of physical activity that helps to shift from one type of thinking or way of being into another and can help us to feel like we can let go of stress or have better self-care. But for others, reaching out to those support systems. So whether it's friends and family who are there as genuine supports for us and can give us the type of feedback that is actually meaningful in our lives, can be really helpful. And other times, reaching out for professional support and being able to have a safe space that is non-judgmental can be the need that somebody has to be able to transition through stress and anxiety or decompress from a difficult task.
Depending on the situation, sometimes family and it might need to go further than family and friends and seeking the professional help, seeking tools that are out there, research that is out there. It's there, available, and if someone can access it, go for it. Very hard to do. Very hard to take that decision, though.
And that's why it's so important to have these conversations like today is that
it's to normalize.
It's normal. Everybody struggles. No one is immune to it. Anxiety is a perfectly normal emotion, but it's not always a healthy emotion. Stress is a normal thing we experience. It's not always a healthy thing we experience.
Lindsay, Tazeen, it's been a real pleasure chatting with both of you today. But before we wrap things up, are there any resources you'd like to recommend to our listeners that are maybe struggling with stress, anxiety, burnout, etc.?
I would point towards our website, docorg.ca, where there's a drop-down menu under filmmaker tools, and you will see a mental health database, which is a list of resources across provinces for general resources, but there's also some specific resources for documentary filmmakers on that page.
Well, of course, I have to promote TELUS Health MyCare. So it is a virtual service and is accessible to people in BC, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec. And the app, the TELUS Health MyCare app, is a free app that allows you to register and go and book in with a counselor of your choice, as well as the Canada-wide 988 number. So 988 is a suicide prevention number that is available to anyone, anywhere in Canada, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, for anyone who might be feeling at risk in some way.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you both for sharing those resources. I'm sure many of our creators could really benefit from those. And I want to thank you both again for spending time with us here on First Frame.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Well, Jen, this has been another not only insightful, but really important conversation. I really feel like Lindsay and Tazeen helped us understand that it's important to take time for yourself, be kind to yourself, and build that network, which you've also heard a number of times. So build that network of support around it. Everything doesn't have to come at a cost. It can be things as easy as going for a walk, or it can be going and talking to a psychologist.
For me in this episode, what was really interesting was sort of that differentiation between, your digital content creators that I think across the board, mental health is an issue, but digital content creators, it's the go, 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 the hustle, the constantly having to create and put things out there for your audiences. And then to the flip side, it's, to those filmmakers where projects run much longer, those long shoot days, the long timelines, the never really getting to stop because first it's pre-production, then it's production, then it's post-production, then it's marketing, film festival circuits, et cetera. So I think, across the board, it's just obvious that, mental health challenges and issues can come up in any type of content creation, acknowledging that it's normal and taking a breath to acknowledge where you're at. And I think that's probably the piece that most creators miss, is taking that moment to go, where am I? Until it gets to a point that it's maybe a little bit more severe. That's it for this episode of First Frame, brought to you by TELUS STORYHIVE. Thanks so much to you, our viewers and listeners, for joining us today.
Please hit follow so you don't miss a single episode. And be sure to tune in next time for a special look back at the conversations and advice that really resonated with both Jen and I from this entire season.
If you'd like to learn more about how TELUS STORYHIVE can help you along your content creation journey, you can check out storyhive.com. Until next time, I'm Jennifer Park.
And I'm Cameron Zinger, and that's a wrap.